are these people?
I need Richie saying that on the soundboard.
Yes, you do.
But anyway, you've got a bit of history for us, you know.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and blather my way through it here.
Okay.
Let me see what we got here. I'm gonna get on the deck and just take a look.
Yep.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about a little bit of history. And this history has, I'm going to start it off with the Vietnam War. I'm not going to go back before then because the Vietnam had some of the biggest anti-war rallies in history that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
So we're going to start there. So if you want to kick it to the next slide, history, learn from it or die repeating it. And that's what we're going to do. But we're going to start with the Gulf of Tonkin where this lying crap started. And this is back there during Lyndon Johnson after Kennedy got assassinated. And he was all in for escalating the war in back then, the Vietnam War. So I just want to give everybody a little idea of what was said or how the Gulf of Tonkin evolved. So if you go to the next slide and kick the video off, they'll get a little taste of it. It's not a very long video. Give it a shot and let's take a listen.
The Gulf of Tonkin Incident, 1964, the Vietnam War. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident, or the USS Maddox Incident, is the event responsible for America's entry into the Vietnam War. Vietnam was divided into halves, North and South, ruled by separate regimes, but the United States were concerned that Ho Chi Minh and the Communists would win the upcoming elections and were determined to stop the spread of communism. U.S. military involvement, however, had been minimal until 1964. President Lyndon B. Johnson had been training South Vietnamese mercenaries, sending them into North Vietnam to carry out acts of sabotage and gather intel. On July 31, 1964, South Vietnamese commandos had attacked North Vietnamese targets in the Gulf of Tonkin. On August 2, 1964, American naval destroyers had moved into North Vietnam waters to gather intelligence on the enemy's naval strength. The USS Maddox was nearing the mouth of the river delta when Captain Herrick noticed that they were being followed by North Vietnamese torpedo boats and had intercepted communications of their intention to attack, so he fired 3 warning shots. The USS Maddox was then fired upon by the enemy torpedo boats. Captain Herrick retaliated and opened fire on the torpedo boats and with the assistance of U.S. jet fighters hit all 3 enemy targets. The enemy boats had fired their torpedoes, but they all missed. The USS Maddox then retreated back into international waters. 2 days later, a second patrol was launched into the Gulf of Tonkin by the USS Maddox and the USS Turner Joy, when Captain Herrick reported that they were again under attack. Secretary McNamara and President Johnson agreed that retaliation was needed and the expansion of the war was approved by Congress. However, Herrick sent a later message claiming that he was mistaken about the attack and that freak weather action may have led his men to overreact. The final part of the message read, "No actual visual sightings by Maddox. Suggest complete evaluation before any further action taken." Nevertheless, this was ignored by Johnson and his advisors who continued on with the retaliation plan. On August 5th, Johnson made a public speech stating, "The determination of all Americans to carry out our full commitment to the people and to the government of South Vietnam will be redoubled by this outrage." Shortly after his speech, U.S. aircraft bombed North Vietnamese targets, torpedo boat bases, and an oil storage depot. America was now drawn into the Vietnam War. President Johnson made a speech via the media to the American people to get their support for the war and described the attack on 2 U.S. Navy warships as a deliberate aggression. By late 1965, 200,000 American troops were on the ground, with more on the way.
Cool. I know this guy. Simple History, I think, is the YouTube channel. Tries to make wars as simple as possible, which we know how that goes. Nothing's ever.
Yeah, that was pretty simple though, and that wasn't the story. That was just basically an absolute lie. The Gulf of Tonkin was a lie. I'm going to see if I can move the slide.
Go ahead.
And
yeah, go the other way now, and then hit it twice. One more. One more.
The Gulf of Tonkin Incident, 1964.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So this is the USS Maddox. This is a destroyer. And, it's reported that it was attacked by 3 PT boats that were torpedo boats by the North Vietnamese.
Yep.
And I just want to show you guys, would be these things right here.
Oh, these little almost junks? Almost?
Yeah, almost junks. And, this is where lies start to evolve. If you just take the narrative that's given to you by, the military or the government for that matter, in terms of war, because I believe our government's run by the military industrial complex. We are not run by a democracy anymore. But you're telling me back in 1964 that a destroyer, I can go to previous slide, right?
Yep.
A destroyer, yeah, I'm trying to get the hang of this. This is kind of fun. Was attacked by 3 PT boats, which carry, I think, 2 torpedoes and a couple of large caliber guns.
Yeah.
But this is one is in dry dock right here. That's how do you think that would size up to a destroyer? Even 3 of them.
I mean, we're talking, what's that hull material?
It looks like fiberglass to me. I don't know, something like that. Yeah, if that. I mean, so yeah, and it's those are rocket tubes up there of some kind for the era.
Yeah, and here's your torpedo, which you're talking about.
Actually, I think that's the okay.
Double steel hull.
Yeah, so they usually they have 2 of those things, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So moving right along, I'm calling bullshit on that out of the gate. So what I did is I put together a little presentation here, and this is clipped up instead of me trying to read because I can't read and I can't see half the time. But I put this together, and it explains the lie that the Gulf of Tonkin actually was, the ramifications, and how we didn't learn from that incident and kept doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result.
You mean like we did with the Maine and
all that other stuff, and I believe all those other all these other lie us into war stuff.
Yeah. So
here is I'm going to start. I think when I click it over, the video automatically starts. So
it should.
Here's the first segment, and this is not something that I pulled from somebody else. I pulled the article from FAIR right here, and then I transcribed it from text to voice, and then I built this with the DaVinci Resolve. So here we go. Here's the first segment. Pay attention.
30 years ago, it all seemed very clear. American planes hit North Vietnam after second attack on our destroyers. Move taken to halt new aggression, announced a Washington Post headline on August 5, 1964. That same day, the front page of the New York Times reported, President Johnson has ordered retaliatory action against gunboats and certain supporting facilities in North Vietnam after renewed attacks against American destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin. But there was no second attack by North Vietnam nor renewed attacks against American destroyers. By reporting official claims as absolute truths, American journalism opened the floodgates for the bloody Vietnam War.
Why?
30 years ago, it all seemed very clear. American planes hit North Vietnam after second attack on...
God.
Was that the same one? That was the same one, right?
Yep, there you go.
Okay, so we can talk about this. Now, there was no second attack, and I doubt that there was a first attack. This is all developed to gain influence for the White House, for the military-industrial complex to go to war in Vietnam. Right. And they used, did you hear that part in there? They used the media, the mass media, the Western media to push this.
Yes.
So even back in 1960, in the 1960s, they were using the American press to propagandize war, going to war for another country. And they say, oh, we need to go and fight for democracy because they're communist and they're killing their people, and the same bullshit they always have. So listen to the next segment and it'll give you a little more information on where it's going.
Cool. And I hit this and I hit this.
A pattern took hold. Continuous government lies passed on by pliant mass media, leading to over 50,000 American deaths and millions of Vietnamese casualties. The official story was that North Vietnamese torpedo boats launched an unprovoked attack against a U.S. destroyer on routine patrol in the Tonkin Gulf on August 2nd, and that North Vietnamese PT boats followed up with a deliberate attack on a pair of U.S. ships 2 days later. The truth was very different. Rather than being on a routine patrol August 2nd, the U.S. destroyer Radix was actually engaged in aggressive intelligence gathering maneuvers in sync with coordinated attacks on North Vietnam by the South Vietnamese Navy and the Laotian Air Force. The day before, 2 attacks on North Vietnam had taken place, writes scholar Daniel C. Hallen. Those assaults were part of a campaign of increasing military pressure on the North that the United States had been pursuing since early 1964.
Okay.
Next slide.
Yep.
So the question is, why? Why would the United States be pursuing war with North Vietnam? Ask yourself that. It wasn't about democracy, ladies and gentlemen. It was about resources. It was about their rubber trees. They had rubber trees up there. I think BF Goodrich, Goodyear, they wanted to get in there and take those resources. It was about the metals, precious metals, the lead, the tin reduction. They wanted to put these things in. Yeah, all of these things. It's the same old song and dance, and we still haven't learned that today. They didn't want to spread democracy or help the people. They didn't give a shit about those people because the proof's in the pudding. They killed hundreds of thousands of North Vietnamese and maimed, and the casualties were just unbelievable. So let's continue. I don't want to get hung up without going through and giving each segment a context, but we know why we went in there. It wasn't for democracy.
Yep. Full screening.
On the night of August 4th, the Pentagon proclaimed that a second attack by North Vietnamese PT boats had occurred earlier that day in the Tonkin Gulf, a report.
And if the Pentagon decided to say something, you know it's bullshit.
Cited by President Johnson as he went on national TV that evening to announce a momentous escalation in the war: airstrikes against North Vietnam. But Johnson ordered U.S. bombers to retaliate for a North Vietnamese torpedo attack that never happened. Prior to the U.S. airstrikes, top officials in Washington had reason to doubt that any August 4th attack by North Vietnam had occurred. Cables from the U.S. Task Force commander in the Tonkin Gulf, Captain John J. Herrick, referred to freak weather effects, almost total darkness, and an overeager sonarman who was hearing ship's own propeller beat. One of the Navy pilots flying overhead that night was Squadron Commander James Stockdale, who gained fame later as a POW and then Ross Perot's vice presidential candidate. I had the best seat in the house to watch that event, recalled Stockdale a few years ago, and our destroyers were just shooting at phantom targets. There were no PD boats there. There was nothing there but black water and American firepower.
Interesting.
Yeah, so, this is eyewitness accounts, and I'm going to believe Stockdale before I believe the Pentagon or the military-industrial complex. So, moving to the next slide, this whole disaster was premeditated by the United States government, and once again, to take their shit and to capitalize their precious resources, to take them away. And the results we got from this Vietnam War were horrific, you know, as far as Agent Orange, the My Lai massacre, the horrendous things that happened, and not to mention the screwing of the minds of the soldiers at that point in time. They thought they were fighting for democracy and freedom. They were fighting for corporations like Union Carbide and Dow Chemical and all these other places because they wanted their precious metals and materials.
So
do you want to go
in the chat said Vietnam's key mineral endowment includes coal, bauxite, rare earth,
yes,
titanium,
phosphate,
rocks,
yes,
and iron. Coal remains one of the primary energy sources for the domestic market. Human Love Solidarity says Vietnam was the breadbasket for the East, and Ukraine is a breadbasket. Control the food, control the people.
I couldn't agree more, gentlemen. Abso-frickin-lutely. Let's go to the next slide before I get on my soapbox again. This is really, and you're going to understand why this is such a sore subject with me.
In 1965, Lyndon Johnson commented, "For all I know, our Navy was shooting at whales out there." But Johnson's deceitful speech of August 4, 1964, won accolades from editorial writers. The president, proclaimed the New York Times, went to the American people last night with the somber facts. The Los Angeles Times urged Americans to face the fact that the communists, by their attack on American vessels in international waters, have themselves escalated the hostilities. An exhaustive new book, The War Within, America's Battle over Vietnam, begins with a dramatic account of the Tonkin Gulf incidents. In an interview, author Tom Wells told us that American media described the airstrikes that Johnson launched in response as merely tit for tat, when in reality they reflected plans the administration had already drawn up for gradually increasing its overt military pressure against the North. Why such inaccurate news coverage? Wells points to the media's almost exclusive reliance on U.S. government officials as sources of information, as well as reluctance to question official pronouncements on national security issues. Daniel Hallen's classic book, The Uncensored War, observes that journalists had a great deal of information available which contradicted the official account of Tonkin Gulf events. It simply wasn't used. The day before the first incident, Hanoi had protested the attacks on its territory by Laotian aircraft and South Vietnamese gunboats. What's more, it was generally known that covert operations against North Vietnam, carried out by South Vietnamese forces with U.S. support and direction, had been going on for some time.
Yep.
And next slide. And there hadn't even been a declaration of war. Total bullshit, and totally against the Constitution of the United States. You know, does this sound familiar, Reef?
Absolutely.
How the media took what the government said, and government officials, instead of dying what they were being said, vetting the bullshit that they were selling the American public. It's like today all over again. It's like today is like Vietnam all over again. They're setting us up for a long, protracted war once again. This is absolutely unconscionable that the American public is so lazy and so distracted and disconnected from what our country is doing around the world. It breaks my heart, because we're on the road to total annihilation. You know, the people are going to say, "Oh, Oz, you're just overreacting." Well, World War III, nuclear, destruction of the planet. And let's just layer that on top of global climate catastrophe, toxification of our air and water. And last week, 2 weeks ago, we got it, toxification of Ohio, East Palestine, air and water. So, prove me wrong. Come on, just prove me wrong. Go to the next slide. I think it's the last video that I've got clipped there. Reef, and Yeah, whatever you say, boomer. You sound like a boomer, Oz. You're just ranting here. Well, I rant pretty good, so I'm just going to keep it up.
Yep, I'm down for ranting.
In the absence of independent journalism, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, the closest thing there ever was to a declaration of war against North Vietnam, sailed through Congress on August 7. Two courageous senators, Wayne Morse of Oregon and Ernest Gruening of Alaska, provided the only no votes. The resolution authorized the president to take all necessary measures to repel any armed attack against the forces of the United States and to prevent further aggression. The rest is tragic history. Nearly 3 decades later, during the Gulf War, columnist Sidney Schamberg warned journalists not to forget our unquestioning chorus of agreeability when Lyndon Johnson bamboozled us with his fabrication of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Schamberg blamed not only the press but also the apparent amnesia of the wider American public. And he added, "We Americans are the ultimate innocents. We are forever desperate to believe that this time the government is telling us the truth."
Cool.
And yeah, and the next slide, I'll tell you, the absence of independent media, which we have pretty much, we have an independent media out here. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting in one of our independent media streams right now. We don't have enough. We don't get the support. And because of that, we're going to end up going into these Gulf of Tonkins, these Gulf wars, these Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan wars. We're going to go into, we're heading into the Ukraine war. We're already in that war as far as I can tell. And considering how the history was just laid before you on the Gulf of Tonkin, I see such similarities between what's happening now in Ukraine and what happened then with the Gulf of Tonkin. This picture right here is Senator Wayne Morse and his wife, and I apologize, I forgot her name, and that's my mother there, Kitty, and that's my father. And that just was not a selfie with the senator. My father was actually the campaign manager for Wayne Morse in Portland, Oregon, back in 1967, I think. And so he had the inside scoop. As a matter of fact, he had several discussions with the senator about the Vietnam War. And that's where a lot of my information that I'm telling you tonight came from a United States senator, one of the last United States senators that were honest. And if you want to throw this picture, throw me up in the main viewer again.
Yeah.
Behind me here is Senator Gruening and Senator Morse of that era, of the Vietnam era. And, may they rest in peace, because they were the only two senators who had the cojones to say no to a war that cost over 50,000 American servicemen's lives and 1 million plus Vietnamese lives. So may they rest in peace, and the rest of them burn in hell, as far as I'm concerned. If you want to go to the next slide there.
Yep.
I just remember this. I don't know if you can remember this, Reef. You're an awfully young gentleman.
Yep.
We won't fight, and the rich man's war. Yeah. So, and I think there was a song that coined that phrase in it. But this was the real thing. Does it sound familiar? What's happening today? So they've outsourced jobs, industry, so much now, to where one of the biggest jobs in this country is the military. And just like other countries, they do the same thing in China and other countries. There are not a lot of jobs out there, so people have to, by default, join the military for a paycheck so they can have a house and food and raise a family. Back then, things haven't changed that much. It's just gotten worse and worse and worse. Now, I just want to show you on the next slide what Senator George McGovern said at the end of this video about the Vietnam War. And this was a anti-war protest in D.C. There were over 50,000 people at this anti-war protest.
Last month, the President of the United States said nothing you young kids would do would have any effect on him. Well, I suggest to the President of the United States, if he wants to know how much effect you youngsters can have on the President, he should make one long-distance phone call to the LBJ Ranch and ask that boy how much effect you can have.
Yeah.
Tragically, our nation's leadership, while striving for peace, has adopted a course that makes real peace unlikely. It is a policy that believes we can brutalize the North Vietnamese into making concessions at the negotiating table, that we can convert by words alone a corrupt Saigon government into a government representative and responsive to the needs of its people.
Yeah, a dangerous effort is underway in this country to confuse, to divide, to intimidate the American people, including the news commentators of our country. When the great television networks and one of our most distinguished senior statesmen are assaulted by the very highest executives of our government, then it seems to me that no citizen is safe and liberty itself is in danger. That
How dare you!
Is not the method of this peaceful assembly. It is not the method of America. So I plead again to every citizen, and especially to those in the press and in television on whom all of us depend for our information, do not let them scare you into silence.
Do not let them scare you into silence.
That sounds
That's
like
what's
Jimmy Dore.
happened. Yeah, well, you know, that hit piece that Rachel Maddow did on the Rage Against the War rally was disgusting.
I've got it.
And she is a human piece of garbage propagandist. And I've got to tell you, I don't think I could. I don't think I could look that woman in the eye. I'm so enraged with her. Anyway, let's go to the next one before I get on my soapbox. Now we're switching over to my second part of the story. I did a composite of two together. So this young lady she was the Kuwaiti girl,
The incubator baby lady.
the incubator baby. I think it's Nayrah and Nayrah. Does that sound right? Nayrah.
I think so.
She was the one that described how Iraqi troops killed 312 babies by throwing them out of their incubators. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll try and read that one. The key inflection point to move the American public and Congress towards supporting the war in Iraq was the gruesome 1990 testimony of Kuwaiti girl named Nayrah, who described how Iraqi troops killed 312 babies. Problem was, Nayrah's story was made up. It was a lie. It was made up. It was a lie. I think she was the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter or niece. Americans, despite their ambivalence over sending U.S. troops, Americans might have been less conflicted had they known that the baby incubator story was a hoax. The lie that started out as a rumor, which was first picked up and propagated by the American PR firm Hill and Carlton, just 9 days after the Iraqi invasion, in a front group for the Kuwaiti government, known as Citizens for Free Kuwait, paid the firm $10.8 million to galvanize U.S. public opinion in favor of intervention. Now, this is how they do it. They buy people off. They get them up in line. They bring them to State of the Unions and they put them up on stage where they can ask for money and say all the horrendous things that the supposed enemy is doing for them. History is repeating itself once again. Anyway, next slide. The American people, after hearing about incubator babies, hell yeah, we need to go over there and save those babies. You know, we need to bring democracy to that country. The problem is these days, and like back in 1964, in the 60s, we don't see the coffins and the body bags like we did back then. Even here with the Iraq war, we didn't go to the next slide. We didn't hear, or we didn't get to see this kind of stuff. So everybody was pissed off at Bush and Cheney because of their lying us into this Iraq war, which they did lie us in. It's been proven. And we had the coffins coming back. Now, the next statistic isn't going to surprise many of you who already know what it is. We lost over 7,000 service members. The problem I have with this is that when a war is supposedly over, when Biden pulled out the troops, the suicides kept going. And I don't know how old, I think this is a year old, but to date, over 30,000 service members and veterans of post 9/11 wars have died. So the actual number is going to keep increasing from these wars, just like Vietnam, because you remember how the service members came back from Vietnam. They didn't have a pot to piss in. They were called baby killers and unthoughtfully, you know.
Yeah, this war though, you came back and you got put on the cover of Call of Duty, and you know,
yes, they've
never
learned.
Heard of again.
They've absolutely learned over the decades how to screw with the American people's minds and propagandize us. And as Shanda and I talk about all the time on Beauty and the Boomer and Roar Media, we are propagandized from birth. And the likes of the propaganda comes from pieces of garbage like Rachel Maddow, MSNBS, and Clown News Network, and the rest of the Western media, which is owned by the military industrial complex, the fossil fuel industry and big pharma, Boeing, Raytheon, you know, all of them. So, you know, if you think you're getting news from there, what's wrong with your head? You're not getting news. Right. You're getting pure propaganda. I'd go toe to toe with any of those clowns because they're being paid to lie. These are not stupid people. They know what they're saying. They know the propaganda, and I just don't know how they can live with themselves. If you would go to the next slide, I'll expand a little bit more. So we move right along. And here we're up to the coup in Ukraine. The background and implications of the 2014 far-right coup in Kiev, which overthrew the pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych, is critical for understanding the current Ukraine-Russian war. This coup was openly supported by the U.S. and European imperialism and implemented primarily by far-right shock troops such as the Right Sector and the neo-Nazi Svoboda Party. I'm not going to read the whole thing. You guys get the point. In the U.S., the coup was a catalyzer for an even more aggressive campaign against Russia and a significant shift to the right among layers of the upper middle class. U.S. imperialism and NATO have funded the Ukraine state and the far right forces with billions of dollars. And I will add two Nazis in this country. This is absolutely ridiculous. History is repeating itself in 2014. Then we get to 2016, and there's old Tim Kaine and Hillary right there. We're going to win so we can go over to Ukraine and kick some ass and take their shit and team up and have missile locations right next to the Russian border. So we'll have NATO, we'll give them a gift. But going to the next slide, oops, something went wrong with that. Oh, no, the reality TV show host won. No war in Ukraine, damn it. So Hillary and Tim Kaine and the Democratic Party were a little bit disappointed because I submit to you all, they plan to go into Ukraine and start this shit in 2017. So Donald Trump gets in there, and he is notably a loose cannon. I don't believe half the shit he said, but he said what needed to be said to attain the presidency. He appealed to the people of the hinterland, where Hillary Clinton couldn't spend 5 minutes talking to them because her ego and her asshole husband advised her not to. And, you know, that's such a good thing. Now, We know that Bernie ran back then too and gave her a lot of heat. But going to the next slide, Bernie in 2020, we're going to just fast forward to 2020. He got screwed out of it again. And I don't think he got screwed. I think he was a willful participant in sheep herding people into the Democratic Party. Thus, the blood is on his hands for fomenting this war and what he's doing now. Bernie goes on time and time again, and he says the right things, just like Donald Trump did back in 2016 to win the election, which in fact Donald Trump did today again in East Palestine.
I've got it.
He said this. He said the same damn thing, and he's on track to become an. I'm going to say this, and Shanda's going to say, Oz, you're backpedaling. No, I'm not. I still think DeSantis is going to be the guy. But today's speech could be a point where Donald Trump just solidified his candidacy as the Republican candidate for president in 24.
As a Floridian, Oz, I will tell you, DeSantis will not be able to hold any punches on a debate stage. Trump is just going to steamroll that guy.
Well, yeah, I think I tend to agree with you. I'm going to have to stick with my prediction because I don't walk it back. But if Trump keeps continuing what he's doing and calling bullshit on what Biden is doing, what any good candidate would do, except a good, honest American candidate, which is not what we see here, would actually be more truthful with the people and use the rhetoric that Trump used today to benefit the public and the people of Ukraine and other countries involved instead of doing what they're doing. So now we're up to Joe Biden wins the presidency in 2020. Oh, joy. Everybody can go to fucking sleep again because we got a Democrat in there and they're going to do wonders. By the way, where's the rest of my check, you asshole? Come on, man. Hey, Jack, I'm not listening to your bullshit or the Democrats or the Republicans. Going next to the next slide. All of a sudden, we have what they call an insurrection. Oh my God, an insurrection? Well, I don't know, guys. I think it was a psyop. And I think it was to build more financial support from the public for the military-industrial complex, to weaponize the police, and to give the Capitol Police more jurisdiction in every state. So if I don't know, is an insurrection something where some gal with a backpack who's an ex-military vet jumps through a broken window and she gets shot four times or 3 times by a Capitol security guard unarmed? Is that an insurrection? I don't believe these people were armed. And I think I know some people died because of circumstances not necessarily related to this riot that got out of hand, which the Capitol Police in some cases let them into the Capitol. But I'm calling bullshit on this too, just so you know. There may be people who don't agree with me in here or viewing this, but I'm calling bullshit because I think this old boomer's critical thinking skills and the experience and the connections and the people I've talked to all my life kind of gives me that opinion. So not an insurrection. For the most part, we had people on the ground. You guys did too, Reef. You know people who were on the ground. It was primarily peaceful, except for a few hundred at that, people who decided to go into the Capitol after being let in and do some damage because they were pissed off about the election results. Now, it's been said that there were some plants, some CIA plants in that group to hype them up. What was that guy's name? There was that, I can't remember his name. The chat knows who his name. The guy that the
one that they can't find and can't track down.
The one that they can't find. They fingered him as a CIA cop. So
yes.
Again,
this is also when it comes to, was it Oath Keepers. Oath Keepers are all ex-DOJ and ex-FBI, and they did a whole study on that too. And they're the ones who show up and suddenly get all their, like baubles on before they head in.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not going to say that all those people were just crazies going in there. They had concerns and they were pissed. They were pissed. And I'm not even going to go there. Trump ramped them up to do that or anything else. Go to the next slide and let's move through this so I don't bore you guys too much.
You're doing great.
Let me see. Oh, so skipping past the so-called insurrection, the riot that got out of control on purpose, we have Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, Shanda and I got first preview of a video that was on that laptop, and we determined through our expertise of doing this, I've been doing this since the 90s. Shanda's been doing it a hell of a long time too. When we saw that video, it wasn't doctored. I mean, the dude was getting a toe job from a little gal in a smoky room, and he was smoking something or doing something. But they got censored before the election because they didn't want this to reflect on Joe Biden.
Who censored that? There was someone very specific at a very specific.
I think it was the Washington Post. The Washington Post was censored.
The Intercept. Who's the DC bureau chief of that organization? I remember correctly.
Brian Grimm.
That's the one. That's the guy.
So, and they were all calling it as Russian disinformation. And that Russian disinformation was mimicked by the Western media, who is owned, I remind you, Raytheon, Boeing, Pfizer, all of it. It's simple. If your sponsors, if your bosses who pay your check would be upset if you didn't do what they want you to do, and it's a wink and a nod too, so they can have plausible deniability. But they know where their paycheck comes from, and they're not going to do anything to jeopardize their multi-figure income, especially these talking heads like that piece of shit garbage, Rachel Maddow. I'm picking on her tonight because I'm pissed because they let her get away with that so far, and I'm glad to see people going after her and holding her feet to the fire. Anyway, going on with the Hunter Biden laptop, that laptop has proven to be a real thing. It wasn't disinformation. And the laptop repairman has been public about it. He's ready to go to court and sue the shit out of him. So now we move along, and here we are. Russia invades Ukraine. Now, why did Russia invade Ukraine, Reef? Because the Russian people in the Donetsk region, is it? Have been murdered. Donetsk region have been brutalized. Donbass region have been brutalized by the pro-Ukrainian, pro-Zelensky government since the Maidan coup, which that was a democratically elected president, the Viktor Yakovich. But after that, they took out their revenge, and they've been killing people in that region. I've heard figures over 14,000 people, and these were Russian-speaking Russian people living in that Ukraine region. So, and we see them getting saran wrapped, shrink wrapped posts, their pants pulled down, humiliated, beat up, murdered, raped, probably everything else. It's just getting worse under the auspices of the Ukraine war. So that probably made it even worse. But Putin's the one that invaded. Now, I hear from so many of our sisters and brothers who are inclined to buy the bullshit. Oh, Putin shouldn't have invaded. He had no right to do that. Well, he sat back since 2014 and, watched this happen. So finally, when the United States ramped this up to the point it did in collaboration or cahoots with the Zelensky government, and all of a sudden NATO's rumbling, and the PR, which is being paid in many cases to make out Putin this big bad guy and everything else, which, sure, he's a bad guy, but who's the real bad guy? It's the bad guys that are trying to line the borders around Russia with missiles and armaments and everything else. Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis?
Yes,
we lost our shit. We lost our shit when they put the missiles in Cuba.
We've been talking about it in Discord here recently about 13 Days. That famous movie. Who's in that? Cusack or Costner? One of those?
I think it was. I think it was Costner.
Right. 13 Days.
I think it was
Cuban
Costner. I could be wrong. Yeah.
Where they lied us into that problem too.
They lied. That's another one. So our U.S. government has been lying us into war ever since the beginning of time or technology or whatever. It's
And
been
they're
that way with all of it. And they're
doing it
still doing it.
now.
And we never learn. We never learn. And ladies and gentlemen, one of these days, you're going to wish you had. Now, we've got Seymour Hersh here, who just explores the Nord Stream pipeline bombing. And you tell me, Reef, why would Russia blow up their own pipeline when they can shut it down? That makes no fucking sense. Go ahead and click this off. Let's listen to Hersh.
Disappointed I am every day in the New York Times.
What I've done
Jeffrey Sachs.
is simply explain the obvious. It just was a story that was begging to be told. In late September last 2022, 8 bombs were supposed to go off. 6 went off under the water in near Bornholm Island in the Baltic Sea, in an area where rather shallow area, and they destroyed three of the 4 major pipelines, the Nord Stream 1 and 2, feeding fuel, gas forever. For many years at great low discounts. And so the meeting was convened to study the problem. What are we going to do? Russia's going to go to war. How can we? This is 3 months before the war. And it was the CIA and the National Security Agency, the State Department and the Treasury Department. The Joint Chiefs of Staff had a representation. And this is a secret group. They were meeting in the most secret, they were meeting in a very secret offices. And this is, I'm writing this obviously from inside. Do you want us to give you recommendations about what to do about stopping Russia that are reversible? More sanctions, economic pressure, we'd already been doing that, or irreversible? Irreversible being kinetic, bomb, bang, bang. Well, it was clear very early. I don't quite know how my old newspaper, the New York Times, how much longer they can pretend the story doesn't exist, because it's just irrational to do so.
Kamswari Kate, Tom Hartman says Cy Hersh is a crazy, old, confused man. Tom Hartman is projecting. Tom Hartman's been sucking at the teat of the military apparatus, i.e. the United States government, ever since Bernie ran for office. Tom Hartman's got TDS and a broken brain. I've got a couple of his books here. I'm going to use them to start for fire starters at a point. And I hate to be at that point because I used to listen to Tom Hartman all the time, but he's another one of these TDS douchebags who should know better, and he doesn't. And I would just love for people to challenge that guy, but they insulate themselves from being challenged on a regular basis because they're lying. And history proves it again. I would love to see someone who is far more articulate and better at discussing things than I am with Tom Hartman and just break it off in his eye socket, along with the rest of these plebes out here that do the bidding of their masters. Now, I'm finishing up here. I'm sorry this took so long, Reef, but I want to be as thorough without being too long. I had a little help from our executive producer, Linda, on this last slide, closing out this presentation, which is slide number 54.
I'm bringing it back.
Yeah. There you are.
Yep, we're here. Give me a second. I had to close it and reload it.
No, that's okay. I probably messed with it. So.
No, you're good. I think it was on my end. Something like didn't update properly.
Yeah, it's been a little glitchy, but I'm glad the video all played. That was nice.
Yeah, that was I can't complain. Furious clicking to get back to the thing we need to.
Yeah, it's disappointing, Kate, to see people that I used to respect who I don't respect anymore, like Tom Hartman and his bullshit, because their flock of sheep that don't have the wherewithal to get through that crap with critical thinking skills breaks my heart. Anyway, this was a Clown News Network report. I just fixed it. Ukraine, Moscow is eked out. USA wants World War III, and I think that's a more accurate still for this.
Yep.
Reef, I just want to ask you, after watching this presentation, do you think I made some comparisons that will hold water in my assertion that our government has been lying to us for decades and they're getting ready to lie us into another war that I believe we're already in?
God, it sounds
And
like
what's your view of all this?
you're such a Putin puppet, Oz.
Yes.
You know?
Oh.
But no, I mean, of course, like, I feel like anyone who's been paying attention to even the history books they're given will know that, like, yes, we've been lying since the Revolutionary War, let alone this one. We've lied us into every war, every conflict. You know, I mean, what, we're going to go back to Oliver North and the Sandinistas? We're going to go to, like, which particular part of history do you want to go look at? It's all over it, you know? So deep state with the little fingers everywhere, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
At least one of them used to just do it with an actual filing cabinet, you know?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And Saul says, yeah, since World War I. Yes, actually, so I just went back to Vietnam or we'd be here all night. Vic says, can't Kate barely watch Democracy Now? I can't either. I mean, Amy Goodman she needs to just retire. Please go away. All these outlets, Anthony Malecki says, I'd say but it matches the viewers. Hi, everyone. We're a choir here, basically, but we're a choir with facts, and we have historical precedents to base those opinions that we have on this. And if history keeps repeating itself, how do we expect anything to change for the better for the people? Our planet is being murdered before our eyes through catastrophic global climate destruction, through war, militarism, through imperialism. Our air and our water are totally destroyed. Our lakes and rivers are drying up. People are getting cancer and committing suicide at a horrendous increase. All those charts are available if you look them up at reasonably good sources. So I don't know anymore. I think what I should do is just hang up the headphones and the microphone and just go walk outside and get some sunshine and play with the birds and the bees and the four-legged friends until that ultimate day comes, and not worry about it. But I give a shit, Reef. I care about our sisters and brothers. I care about you. I care about Indy. I care about all of our sisters and brothers in independent media. I care about all of the people who give us their valuable time and at least listen to the old boomer rant once in a while. So again, thank you for this opportunity to spew my guts out, starting with Vietnam and the Gulf of Tonkin, and how history is repeating itself once again. And many of us are too dumb to not call bullshit on it. That's my, I'm sticking to it. So there you go.